Clean they like riding, but I know that they ain't. Ride or die. I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.
Is James here to speak? Is James someone you know?
No, well, let's see. James, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is James. I do a YouTube channel, James is Tired.
Oh, okay. What's it about?
Typically I interview people, different apologetics. I'm a Christian. I have other people on, like I just posted a debate, well, not a debate, an impromptu discussion between the Muslim metaphysician and my friend, um, Praise I Am, on the Trinity.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take it. Let's take it step by step. Let's take it slow here. What is your reasoning for not becoming Muslim and accepting the message of the prophet who was sent to you, who was Muhammad?
I have several, but maybe we just hit one at a time. That way you guys have a chance to respond to each one.
Yeah,
Because I
please,
find
one at a
like
time.
if you
Like you
machine
said, if
gun
you
fire things,
But
then it's not
exactly.
I,
productive.
I I would prefer if you start with the most creedal aspect, for example, the ones related to God, rather than sort of the side issues that some people bring up, which is, for example, why did Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, peace be upon him, do this at this particular time or do this action? Rather, I'm sure you have those questions, but I'd rather you start with the main tenets of faith that you find problematic.
Well, so some of the things we can agree on across cultures, like the worship and belief in one God, we agree on that. That it's from the Abrahamic line, we agree on that. So there's a lot of those things that we can have agreement with. My primary issue is that I don't believe that the Quran is from God or that Muhammad is a prophet.
Okay. But
Okay.
you believe the Bible is from God, right? The Bible that you
Yes.
hold today.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's because I've read both, read the Bible and I've read the Quran. And when I look at the Bible, I see all these books together, some 50 some authors that speak in commonality. And then I see things like the Dead Sea Scrolls that were buried like 100 years to 300 years before Jesus um, walked the earth, that confirm the Torah has not been changed from what we have today and what we would have had during Prophet Muhammad's time. So there's a lot of questions like why would Jesus not speak of corruption in the Torah if the Torah was corrupted at his time? And then you would have to figure out what time and when was Muhammad saying that the Torah was corrupted. I think he means that not the actual writing was corrupted. I think this was my view of the most earliest Muslim interpretation of it, that the Bible itself is not corrupted. The words of Jesus are not corrupted, but that the meaning, I think that's what the Prophet Muhammad was going for. But I think that causes another fundamental problem because it conflicts, like his message outright conflicts with what the Bible plainly says.
So I'd first ask, the Bible, the Torah, and the Bible that you read is written by different authors, right? How do you know that those authors definitely wrote this what is in your hand? So if it's the book of Mark, how do you know he wrote that? How do you know that is his own speech? And when did he write it? When did he say it? When did he write it? When was it preserved? Do you have these details for
So
each
we
book?
have, so we have for several, because there are some books that are more contentious where they're wondering if it was Paul who wrote it or if it was one of Paul's students. And so there's I think like one or two of Paul's letters that some people typically challenge. The majority they don't. When it comes to like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we typically believe that Matthew wrote Matthew. We do that based on what the earliest church fathers have said and indicated. We believe that For example, Mark was the scribe of Peter, and then we believe John was the last of the Gospels to be compiled. We also can narrow down some things like the book of Acts would have had to have happened before the collapse of the temple because there's nowhere near any mention of the temple being gone, and then they actually write um, information that would indicate that a temple's there. So these are just things that we use to try to verify the method and the preservation.
So, for example, you're saying the church fathers would be the ones who would verify or would would tell us that that was definitely written by Paul or Mark or John. But what's where would you see this? For example, if I want to go, I want to trace it back, and I want to see, did John definitely write this letter or this passage? Where would I get the verification from? Who else heard him say it? Who else saw him write it? Who else checked his writing? Was it something he said and someone else relayed it? Like you said, the issue of the scribe. Who checked that? So where do we see this? Because I know you mentioned that the Quran, you don't believe it's the word of God, but with the Quran we actually know who said it, who who heard it, who wrote it, when they died, when they were born, how many people were present, how many people memorized it, how many people had it. So the Quran was said in front of a group of companions, who then said it in front of a group of 100 people, who then said it in front of a group of different 100 people. This is how the Quran was transmitted through the centuries. The Bible wasn't like that. So even if you can say the Bible was written in this century at this time by one person, and then who told another person, that then isn't enough, because did they have any verification process at the time? Because I can tell you with the Quran there was a verification process right after the Prophet Muhammad SAW died. As soon as he died, people were going around, his companions were going around verifying who heard what at what time and collecting all of that data and actually checking everything, double checking. And this was after everyone, most of the people had already memorized it. So that,
Have you?
I mean, I don't want to go on for long. So I just get a
No,
gist
no,
of
you're good.
what's the difference.
Have you? Have you ever read a biography of the Prophet Muhammad?
Yes, I have.
By chance, did you read Muhammad, his life based on the earliest sources?
Maybe no, I don't think I've read that. If that's a book by that title, then
The
maybe
other
not.
one that people typically read is I think it's Seal and Nectar. I can't remember the
Yeah,
exact title
I read it a long time ago. Still Nectar, yeah.
because I haven't read that one. I went to the earliest sources one because I've been heard great things, and that was the one that I read. Um,
Okay.
so when I hear like how the Quran was compiled through some Muslim apologists, it seems very different than how the biography portrays this, and then how other elements, like for example, the majority of hadith is fictitious, meaning that it's not verified that it's actually correct. I mean, then you see later on gathering processes with Muslim and Bukhari, and you see them having um, to get these things in line. So when I'm looking at like the compiling of the Quran, I don't see in the Islamic history that the Quran was actually compiled until after Muhammad died,
Yeah, I
because
did
well,
say that. I did
notice.
mention that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're agreement there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then um, when he was alive, he would actually revise surahs periodically. So there would be, and some of this we have still today in like Islamic writings, where you can see like where they're actually referencing the change. And
Yeah,
so
he would revise the order. He would revise certain things like this. Not really. He wouldn't revise the actual words, but he's revising the order. So
no, he
the
would
order
replace
was.
verses.
Sorry.
He would replace verses. I'm trying to
Yes,
remember where it is in the Quran.
that happened. That happened under instruction from God.
Yes, perfect. So we're in agreement that verses would
Yeah.
have been replaced. So then when I hear other arguments that the Quran was read in its entirety during Ramadan twice each year, but then when you look at the Prophet had a 23-year lifespan, if the Quran is constantly being changed and abrogated and isn't finalized till after his death, then we can eliminate that hadith, or you have to reinterpret the hadith and say that they read the bits that they had each year. And then
So,
Ramadan
so
was
this might
go on.
make sense if you're saying like 90% of it was abrogated and constantly changed. That's not the case. For example, a lot of the references of abrogation, you'll find there's only a few verses like this. There's not much. And then there's the hidden implication that okay, maybe there's something that is abrogated and we don't know about. We didn't know that it was abrogated. They knew at the time. So that even that, I think there's only like one or two verses like this where we didn't. There was a verse, and we don't even know the original verse, but we know there was an abrogation after that verse, and so the that verse was lifted, if you like. They're very few, and because they were few, people knew about them. Everybody knew about them. When there was an abrogation, everybody knew from the companions because of the fact that they'd memorized it, because of the fact that they were very the companions of the prophet were very attentive to anything that was meant to be they saw as Quran. So what there's a difference between his speech and when he would say something from Allah, which is God. So there would be a difference between those two. And whenever there would be something from God, they would take even more attention towards that and they would try to memorize that. Even if it was abrogated, yes, they would they would know, okay, this one was abrogated. That's where we get the references from. Oh, so for example, a companion would come up in front of everybody and say, this verse was abrogated, and no one would say, well, we didn't know this, right? They knew about this. So this was well known amongst the companions that the whatever they'd memorized everybody else knew about it. They were taking my point is they took very special attention towards every single verse that was revealed because they knew it was from God. And then they also took attention to that which wasn't from God, which was from the Prophet ﷺ, the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ himself. That was not the Quran, but the Hadith. They took attention towards that, but not as with as much care and as much detail as the Quran. So even if there was abrogations, if there was changes, all of these things were noted down. They were known to the companions. Sometimes they would mention it, but whatever was revealed at the end, the final revision that the Prophet Muhammad SAW did, that was well known, and all the companions knew it. Right.
So there's
So
verses in Hadith where it talks about um he's basically he's saying that it would have been like moving a mountain would have been an easier task than gathering this, than compiling the Quran. And
no,
so
I
when I
don't
go
think it says
back,
compiling the Quran. I think I know the verse you're talking about.
it's in
Um,
Hadith.
it's a hadith.
Because yes, because when I see there's also where a lot of like those manuscripts and these changes or these things that they believe was not supposed to be in the Quran, they just burned. Um, they
Yes, they
burned a
did. Yeah.
lot of material. So, which means that if you're burning all these things that were in the Quran but aren't supposed to be in the Quran now, then you're not actually guaranteeing that you're preserving the Quran or that you're preserving the things that should be in or shouldn't be in.
So what they burnt was they burnt the variances. So you had different variances of the Quran, and these were allowed. So if you look into the hadith, you would know that there's different. There was one hadith specifically that talks about different types of recitations, different allowances given to different tribes and different types of people who would have a different accent, who would read the Quran in a different way. And when they were in the process of compiling the Quran, some of these other forms, some of them we didn't want all of them out there because it was causing confusion to other people who were coming into Islam. So what they did was they just let's just make one type, right? So what they did was they made one type of they just made one let's say what do you call it, manuscript or sample, or let's say like one embodiment of that Quran that they would say, okay, let's let everyone follow this one, which is the same as the others. It was the same as the others, but make this a model for the world, right? So that was called the Usmani script. That was a script by because the companion's name was Usman, and that was the one that was kept with Abu Bakr, one of the companions of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that was the one that was shared around the whole world. The other ones, it was causing confusion for other people because of the different types of dialects and things like this. So what they did was they just said, look, let's burn those ones. So that was an agreement they came up with. That doesn't mean we lost anything from the Quran itself. We just lost some variances of it. So there's different ways of reading it or different types of allowances that were given. We might have lost that. That's how that whole sort of part of history works. If you read the apologist part at least, you would know that side of the
Well, no,
argument.
I mean,
Yeah.
I understand what different Muslim apologists will say for sure, but even like today, we still have different physical copies of the Quran in existence. Um, we have at least 7 well-known different copies that are used throughout the world today. Like Hafs is the biggest one,
Yeah,
which
Hafs
which
is not a copy. Hafs is a recitation, right? So because the Quran is a reciting type of medium. So you have so when I'll give you one example, right? In Hafs, they might say something with the very long, and in another one they might say ah. So just like I don't know where you're from, if you're from America, but you might have different people. You might be living in a certain state, and in another state they just talk differently. And so the way that would we because the Quran is so well preserved, we even preserve that in its 7 different forms. That actually
these things will actually.
adds on to the.
Are you familiar with Farid Responds?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
I don't watch him much, but I have heard from him.
On my channel, I have a video with him, 2 of them, and we go through some of these things, and he will tell you what I'm about to tell you. In
Okay.
some of these different recitations, it's not just always about vowing or like saying a word longer, but there are actually like completely different word substitutions where the word is
There are,
completely
but
different.
did he not tell you that they have similar meaning or they are both accepted meanings as well? Did he not tell you that?
Well, there's, for example, the one that comes to mind off the top of my head is one which says that I will, and the other one says that they will.
Yeah,
I and
I'm
they
saying
are completely different because I am the subject, and then the other
yeah.
one they are the subject. The other one's not as some of the other ones aren't as bad, like where it says to feed one poor person or to feed per persons. That could just cause you a little bit of a theology issue, which is do you get by feeding one, or is it the feeding multiple, or is it just you need to feed poor people? But there's all kinds of different things that you can go through. Like, I mean, I'm not so
Have
worried
you
about
found
one says, oh,
an example that you would find and you would say this definitely contradicts they contradict each other in a way that would make Islam not make sense, meaning the message, the tenet of Islam, the pillars of Islam, or the very nature of what Muslims claim. If I look at a different what you call the 7 different forms, this form will say no, they contradict each other completely? Or is it just like you're saying, an I or they, in which the meaning can still be established very similarly? I know what you're saying. I and they are completely
mm,
different, but it's the context. It could be because I've seen some of those examples, and I don't recall them right now. But I've seen some of those examples, and I've never thought, okay, by looking at that my whole world falls apart. But I look at it as this shows the immense nature of how Muslims try to preserve the Quran to the extent that they kept these things. Now, in the past, yes, they burnt some of them, but right now we don't do that because we don't feel we're on the level of any companion where we can say, okay, let's decide to burn something and not this, or let's get rid of one form. Like if the whole, let's say, Muslim community decided, "Oh, let's get rid of this form, we'll just keep this form." No, they're not going to do that anymore. We preserve everything now because we're not on the level of, let's say, the companions who knew the message of Islam the best and who knew exactly what they can and can't take out in terms of these variances that are there. And like I said, the variances, none of them contradict each other to that extent where they contradict the pillars of Islam itself, or the let's say when it comes to is Jesus, you're a Christian, right? So like if one of them said, look, Jesus is God, and another variant said, no, whoever says Jesus is God is evil, that would be a problematic, because then that exposes a big, let's say, flaw. But there's nothing like this, I know.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, so the only way that I could be in agreement with that is if the Islamic claim about the Quran was changed. So if you guys moved it from perfect preservation to
Yeah.
the message is preserved, then I could say sure, the general message from Muhammad is preserved, and I would concede that. I don't see that there's any problem there. But the problem is that when I talk to Muslims, they say if
Yeah,
you
they
have
say the
any verse,
words and the letters. They do. They say the words and the
yep,
letters are preserved, right?
yep,
They say that the everything. I know what you're trying to say, but the reason why we still make this claim is whether or not is this form or the other, one form, because we believe the Quran was revealed in those different ways. I'm sure if you spoke to Farid the response, he would have told you the same thing. He would have said, we believe the Quran wasn't just revealed in one form; it was revealed, and there's a hadith to back this up, where and all companions and all discipline, everyone who had any discipline in Quran, the preservation of the Quran in the past, we're talking early scholars, no one hid from this fact. They all knew there were different versions of of saying the same Quran, right? There's different ways, like you said, the vowels. One person might say it long, another person might not. One person might have it in one word, another verse might have a different word with the same meaning. Like it's almost identical, but it's a different word. You do have that as well, or you
yep,
have, like you said, they or I. But this is all. This is even if we were to remove one. Let's say, for example, tomorrow, the Muslim community decided, look, we don't want this confusion. We want to get rid of they and we want to keep I. But that I still has a precedent all the way back to the. This is what we believe, that I will still has a chain of narration all the way back to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that's why we still claim yes, the letters, the words, all of that is still preserved. Now you can claim that okay, but we have lost some other different variances, but that doesn't matter. We still have one preserved version of the accepted way of the way God intended for us to read the Quran, at least one way. Do you know what I'm trying to
yep.
say now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely understanding your points. I may disagree, but I'm not typically one to try to like to interrupt or I would like to keep it as civil as you can because then the conversation gets better. Then when the replay stays on, the audience learns. They hear, my perspective. They hear your points to it, and then everybody benefits. Um, the Hafs Quran, which is the majority read Quran today by like 95% of Muslims, if you read into the guy who is reciting this, they
Yeah.
don't trust him for reciting hadith. He's considered an unreliable reciter of hadith. So, from my perspective, if he's not trustworthy in something small as hadith, why are we trusting him as something big as like reciting the Quran?
Okay, so that's a good question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I know one thing. You can have people who specialize in something, but we don't trust them in the other specialism. So because they spend their whole lives specializing in Quran, specializing in Quran recitation, that they're so good at it, and there's a reason why they're so good at it. They're so good at knowing what they know that they're not good at the other thing. So you have people that are scholars, right? Right now, you have scholars that specialize in Quran preservation, Quran recitation. They know all the different types of recitations, the ones you spoke about. They know about all these different words and variances. It doesn't bother them. It doesn't make them think that the Quran is not preserved by word. So what they do is, but if you were to ask them about hadith and ask them, okay, what about this hadith? Is it authentic? Is it not? They won't know. That doesn't mean that.
No,
You,
no, that's
so
not what he's saying.
let me ask it
That's
kind
not
of
what he's
like
saying.
this.
Yeah.
James.
So would we agree?
Hold on, James. One second. Okay, that's not what he's saying. Abu, he's saying that someone said that Hafs is not trustworthy,
No,
meaning
he said
that's
it's not.
that
He didn't say that. He said it's not trustworthy in hadith. He didn't say it's not
right,
trustworthy.
right,
Yeah.
and
And
hadith
and
narrations.
and you know, trustworthy
But
in hadith doesn't mean that they're lying. It doesn't mean that. It could mean they have weak, they have a weak,
memory,
weak memory when it comes to hadith. Yeah, and not to do with Quran, because Quran is about memorization of one book, which is much easier than memorizing narration. For example, who said, and when were they born, and who said what at what time.
right, right.
What do you see what I mean? You need to know, for example, a lot of things. I don't know how much he would have had to know at that time, but even now, if you're a specialist in hadith right now, if you're claimed to be a top level specialist, you need to know when every narrator in the chain was born, when they died, did they meet each other, how they narrated, what words did they meet when was their father born, when was their son born. So if you don't know these things, I would say, look, you're not trustworthy in hadith. That's what I'd say to you. I wouldn't take it from you. I would take
But
it from
James,
someone who does know. Yeah.
where'd you get that from though? That's my question. Who told you that
Yeah.
Hafs is not trustworthy for narrating hadiths?
I got that from Muslims.
Yeah.
I
I'm not
don't
saying it's
I don't
true. I'm just
typically
saying that
go.
there's a
No, no,
very,
hold on.
yeah.
You said you got it from Muslims.
Yeah, أخوة.
Yes, I got it
السلام
from
عليكم ورحمة الله
Muslims.
وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. كيف حالك عبد
Combating,
الرحمن؟
I think James is right in that Hafs, he was not like the brother Abu Maryam also said, like he was not specialized in hadith, and so he was not an authority in hadith, and so he specialized in the Quran, and he was very good as a reciter. By the way, James, it's not like he was mediocre in that one. No. Hafs was excellent when it came to the hadith, but when it came to the Quran, but the hadith was not his thing, right? And he left it for the people who are best in it, like they left him in the Quran, for he was one of the best people in it. So that's the whole point about Hafs.
Well, he
Jazakum
still
Allah.
transmitted hadith, but I guess we have to decide what is hadith um, communicating God's message, or is hadith just communicating man's interpretation of God's
Why?
message?
Why do you ask
I
that
would,
question?
because I think that the majority of Muslims would say that if the hadith is talking about Muhammad or the Quran or the companions, that it is portraying, especially where Muhammad is concerned, God's message. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I'm asking, but why did we pivot there? Because here's the point,
You're a little
James.
faint.
If
I'm sorry.
am I? Hold up. I'm trying to say if if Ibn Mas'ud, if Hafs got involved with the hadith, which I would not be surprised that he did. But if he did, then it is for a small extent, James. But however, Ibn Mas'ud and Ibn Abbas and Abu Hurairah and Abdurrahman ibn Auf and Aisha radiallahu anha, these are the people who I go back to when I'm trying to verify the reliability of most of the hadiths, right? And these people are reliable, meaning I look for those people. The existence of Hafs in the transmission of a chain doesn't really tell me that it's unreliable. That's not the issue with Hafs here. Do you understand what was the contention about Hafs?
Yeah, I think this will be something that we are agreeing to disagree on. Because
Okay, so James,
I
you
think
still
that if
haven't
you
given us.
can't be, I'm just thinking if you can't be trusted to transmit something little that has God's word, then I don't know how I can trust you with something big that has God's word. I would have to there'd always have to be a question mark under your capabilities from my perception.
It's okay,
Okay,
James, because
James. Before James,
Hafs
I
wasn't
know
the only one.
exactly why you. One second, Combat Islam. I know exactly why you think like that. It does. The common sense tells you, if Muslims say I don't trust this person in Hadith, then I can't. Then how can I trust him in Quran? Common sense tells you, if that's how a person was seen, then how can I then trust them? But if you understood the history of Islamic sciences, you wouldn't think like that. That's very normal for us to think like that. If, for example, if you go into Hadith sciences and then you start looking at very, very good men, sometimes they were known as, we can't take Hadith from them. Not because they were lying, no, it's because we didn't trust their, for example, their ability to recall an information. We didn't trust their ability to remember things, remember events. Not to do with their memory now, it's to do with how good were they at remembering their own events in their lives or things they've seen or things they haven't seen. So this was very normal to be
Yes.
very rigorous in this sense when it came to hadith for people who are not specializing in that. That's why we have different sciences in Islam. We have, for example, hadith sciences, and they have very specific and very, very strict rules in terms of, okay, this is what we accept, this is not what we accept, and this is what we check, this is not what we check, and how we decide who are the reliable narrators and who are not. And it's not just about, when they say they're not trustworthy, and I think it could just be the wrong word, they don't mean they're lying, or they don't mean that they don't know. They just mean they haven't fit those criteria for hadith. Hadith has a different criteria. Now, at the same time, it could be that, so you have this person, I don't want to say Hafs because I don't know the exact situation, what he said and what hadith he might have said is wrong or whatever, but you do have in history known trustworthy people who've said hadith that they've heard from other people because that's not their specialism. And we don't expect that to be the specialism. We don't take anything away from them. We don't belittle them. We don't say to them, okay, if you're not good at hadith, then that means you're not definitely not good at Quran. No, we know, we realize people fall into their own place. So if this person's really good at Quran, that's why he's not so good at hadith. In terms of hadith, what he would do is he may be just narrating from other people and not checking every single thing like he would with the Quran because it has its own rules and he's quite good at that. Right? Okay,
And
James?
another thing too, James, I want you to be aware, not just you, but everyone has to be aware of something called stumbling blocks. Do you know what a stumbling block is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
So what you're doing right now, you're the same thing that Snow before you when she came up here. She got caught up on what we call a stumbling block. So what happens is we all believe in the existence of Satan, right? So obviously Satan does not want people to be upon the true religion. So what he does is he puts stumbling blocks in front of them so that they get tied up and they never actually get around to uh, accepting the true religion. Okay, so these things like the preservation of the Quran and how old the Prophet was when he married Aisha, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these are called stumbling blocks. Okay, let's get to the actual important like parts of the important aspects or topics that we need to discuss. So, for example, okay, what why don't you accept Muhammad as a prophet that was sent to you, peace be upon him, when there were rabbis in the time of the Prophet ﷺ who knew, because your first point was you read the Bible and it doesn't coincide with what the Quran says, but there were rabbis who were living in the same city as the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and they confirmed that he was a prophet, and some of them even became Muslim, and some Christians who had the scriptures of the Christians, they also became Muslim based on what they read in the scriptures. So how is it that you can come after more than 1,000 years, 1,400 to be exact, or closer actually, and say that since you've read the English translation of what is supposed to be the Torah and the Injil, that you don't see that it coincides with what a messenger should bring? Can you explain that?
So there's some fundamental problems with what you're saying. That is that not all of Jewish people turned to Muhammad and recognized him as a prophet.
I didn't say that.
You can
I said
use you can
I said some.
no,
I
I'm
said
just
some.
I know I'm getting into that. Even if you had like one or two, you would still have some who might have thought Muhammad was a prophet, who may have even still rejected Jesus Christ up until that point. There's this structure throughout history where people may convert back and forth between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but that doesn't give any strength that
No,
One
not just
religion
people,
is
not just
right over
people,
the other.
not just people. I said rabbis, rabbis who knew the scripture. See, you've never read the Torah in Hebrew. I assume maybe you have, but I'm assuming you've never read the Torah in Hebrew. You're not at the level of a
Have
rabbi.
you?
I no, I did not. But I'm saying it's your excuse though. It's not mine. You're saying you read the Bible and it doesn't coincide with what you think a prophet would bring. And what I'm telling you is there are rabbis who are the scholars of the Torah. They read it. They know it better than you, and they said yes, he's a prophet. And some of them became Muslim.
So
So
there's
it's
imams
not a
who
valid
know.
reason.
So there's imams who know how to read the Arabic, recite the Quran, who have left Islam for Jesus Christ, professing Him as the one true God. I don't think that you can use that as evidence any
Well,
more than I can tell you
that's
or
that.
point out these imams and say, hey, they know your religion better than you do, and they left because of the problems. Like
Okay,
that's
but
that's not how
the
you make
problem, the
an
difference
argument.
is I can bring you examples of rabbis um, who've left Judaism and became Muslim. I've never heard of one scholar of Islam who has left Islam to become a Christian. I've never heard of one. And if you can bring me one, maybe you could, shore up your argument. But the point of the matter is there are Christians who read the scripture and became Muslim in the time of the Prophet, peace upon him, like the Nijas, for example, of Ethiopia. Now, maybe you probably could bring a scholar of Islam who became Christian. Maybe you could. I'm sure there's probably some cases of that. But the point of the matter is, when we're trying to decide what the true religion is, and we know, or we should know at least, that the majority of people are going to the hellfire. Okay, so it's upon us to save ourselves, meaning that the majority of the people are going to get tricked by Satan to follow the wrong religion until they die. That's what it basically means.
So I just went just a quick Google search, Muslim imam now Christian, and you can see several examples in the Google search where Muslims who know the scriptures better than you and I are the Islamic texts, and they felt that Jesus Christ is Lord and God and converted. What I'm simply saying is, I'm not saying that that is outright evidence for Christianity, but I'm just using this as an example to
Mm.
dismiss your argument that because a couple of Jewish people at the time who were prominent switched to Islam somehow gives it weight because the message
Yeah.
has
No,
to stand on its own.
hold on a second. You didn't
Wait,
really.
come back. Wait 1 second, James. It was nice talking to you actually, and I wouldn't compare you to Snow. Were you there when Snow was speaking?
I was here
James.
for a little
Yeah.
bit, yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't. I know he compared you to Snow, but I don't think you did any of the funny stuff that you did. But I actually like
Oh,
talking to you.
I didn't know he was. I didn't know he started to attack me. I must have
Yeah, yeah.
missed that part.
No, he was comparing you to Snow. That's all. But what I think is, I really enjoyed the conversation, but I have to go. So, I mean, the only thing I would say before I go is, where I think he was right. What he said, combat to Islam, is where you got into a stumbling block was you spoke about the preservation of the Quran. You mentioned some things. I did answer the issue of why we believe the preservation still exists, even though there's different variances. And then you went to on a side note of about one specific person, which is the stumbling block, because that's kind of very, it's very much of a tangent there. But we did answer the question of the preservation. I really hope so. That doesn't mean that that answers it fully, but the preservation, from what we said and in our own belief, is quite consistent. The issue is comparing that to whatever the Bible has is just two different worlds. The Bible has nothing to show that it's been preserved, almost nothing compared to what the Quran has. So the nitpicky stuff that you found in the Quran, if I was to be as nitpicky to the Bible, it would, there's nothing there. There's almost no one checking anything. In
The
the
issue though
early
is what
times.
we're. The issue is what we're claiming though. Like what is the Christian claiming about the
Okay, I
text?
see what
And
you're
I'm
saying.
not.
I see what you're saying
Yes.
now. The Christians claiming that the message is preserved, right?
Yes. And that there are
Okay, not the
there are
letters and the
things that we
words.
can, yeah, that we can talk about scholarly, and we can dig
Yeah,
into, was this in the earliest manuscript? We can talk through
yeah.
those questions. But right now, Islam is not at that place, and they are consistent on letter for letter, word for word. So if I have good reasons to doubt that, then I have good reasons to doubt that the Quran is from God based on the standards that Muslims lay out?
But we did explain that the letter for letter, word for word, most of it was vowels and elongations and changes just sometimes it's a and a u and a e and things like this. And then you
Abu
did
Maryam,
give some other examples where there was a word change. None of that was on the level of, okay, I can't trust the word and because of this one or two changes that we all know
no,
and
no,
we
no.
all agree
Akhi
on.
Abu Maryam,
So
they're
we,
not changes.
yeah,
They're not changes. I think we need to understand exactly what happened in order to understand the thing about the recitations. Okay, so these recitations, all of them, okay, all of them were approved by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They
that's right.
happened at the time of Prophet Muhammad, so he knew about them and he agreed and approved to all of them. He was aware of all the recitations. This is not some arbitrary distortion that we as a community decided was okay, right? No, this is not what's happening, James. What's happening is the Quran is so easy to recite that it conforms to the seven dialects of the Arabs, and of the seven dialects of the Arabs you had over 10 qira'at, 10 recitations, emergence, over 10. Okay, but over the seven dialects, so yani the Quran was speakable, it was recitable in the seven dialects of the Arab. Dialects meaning they almost had a different way of engaging the Arabic language. Okay, and the Quran dealt with that. Okay, it dealt with even that. This is the
Yeah,
whole thing
so
about
our
recitation.
claim is still correct that the letters, the
No,
words are
no, it's
all
not correct.
preserved.
It's stronger, Brother Abu Maryam. It is a
Yeah,
stronger claim. Yes.
yeah, it's
I
stronger. So
actually think
what's the issue,
I actually
James,
think
where
it's
you said it?
weaker, sadly. But I
Yeah,
gotta get ready to go. But we
okay,
can have a further conversation on this because I always like the friendly back and forth dialogue. That's always
okay,
appreciated. If you check out my YouTube channel, that video with Fareed Responds, maybe you can back channel me your thoughts on it. It's
okay.
only like
I'll have a
20
look for it.
minutes.
What's your name and what's his name? What's the title of the video called?
Uh, it's James's Tired is the YouTube channel. It's there's only two videos on my channel with Fareed.
Is it on
It's the
his channel? Is it on his channel? I mean, the video.
no, it's on mine. I don't think he
Okay,
posted it on his.
okay then. Okay, that's fine. I'll have a look. Okay, if I
Alrighty.
can, I'll have a look. And I'll let you know. I don't know. I'm new to this app, so I'll let you know what I think. But I'm just saying that comparing the two is just doesn't make any sense. But if you're saying comparing in terms of the Bible, we're not claiming that it's word for word, letter for letter. We're not claiming that it has a preservation of letters and words, but the Quran does. But it does the meaning as well. It does both. With the Bible, if you don't have any, if you don't know the letters, you don't know the words are preserved, then where does the meaning come from? The meanings are obviously from that. So meanings are obviously from the letters, from the words to some extent. And how can you then say the Bible's meaning is preserved to an extent? How do you say that? And how much can you prove that? To what extent can you prove it? It becomes a very philosophical discussion, and almost you almost ends up saying, okay, my interpretation versus your interpretation for between Christians, right?
No, we can demonstrate the core tenets of Christianity are preserved, and that the scripture that is speaking of them or referencing them is preserved.
Mhm.
We're not nitpicking about scribal errors or manuscripts that the scribe may have left this out, but we have an earlier manuscript where it's in there. And but when you go to any study Bible, we have all these things bracketed and referenced, and then you can look
You're
down in
well
the
aware that there
columns.
are Christians who disagree on the basic tenets. Well, you have Jehovah's Witness who say God doesn't have a son.
They're not
God,
Christians.
yeah, you're saying that, right? But they have an
Would you
interpretation
consider
that they believe
would you
that
consider a smiley Muslims?
Ismailis.
Yes. Would you consider them Muslims?
I'm not sure they themselves necessarily consider
They
themselves
consider
same type of
themselves
Muslims.
Muslim, um, but you would not consider them Muslim because they don't line up with your core tenets. Neither do Jehovah Witnesses. Like you consider Shias Muslim?
I don't consider all Shias Muslim, but I'll tell you the difference here. There is a difference because we have a few more tenets or a few more part of the Islamic faith. When it comes to God Himself, even the Shias believe God is one. Even the Ismailis believe God is one. We don't have a different group like you do with the Jehovah's Witness, where you
Well, they
disagree on what
they
God
actually
is.
do disagree on things like divine simplicity.
Yeah, you're
Even
going into
within,
the nitty-gritty philosophical nature of God. I'm not talking about. I'm
well,
talking about.
well, I'm
Does
just
God have
saying
a
though that
son?
that's,
Does God have a son or not? None.
but
You won't
it's
find a
whether
Muslim group saying God has a son.
what's
And
whether or not does God have parts? Like that is a serious question within Islam. Does he
Yeah,
have
but
hands,
I think we're going off on a
shin?
tangent though. I mean,
These
I
this would
just
be another subject we can get into when I
yeah,
can
but
come
James,
okay,
back.
yeah,
I just
okay.
want to know. I just want to know before you
Let me
leave,
say
James.
bye to James. Yeah, bye, James. Have a
Well, he
good
Oh
did
day.
yeah,
have one.
thank you, Abu.
He had one little short question. I can answer a short question before I go. Go ahead.
Okay, why is it? I mean, what is it that's different about? And I'm sorry if you thought I was attacking you earlier. I wasn't trying to attack you. I was just trying to get my my question to you. But what is it about Muhammad, peace be upon him, that is different than the previous prophets, where where you consider yourself justified in not believing that he's a prophet?
So the shorthand answer is if you see how the prophet was living and how he conveyed his life, a lot of the things that he was telling people that God was commanding was for the prophet's pleasure. He ended up with more wives than any of the other
No,
Muslims.
let's start with just the belief system first, because yeah, the personal life that can that's pretty arbitrary based on the person, you know, his own personal morals and values. But
But that's where
as far as the belief, no, as far as what he taught the people, like he taught his people to stop worshiping idols and to worship one God, Allah, and to not, I mean, to not, for example, commit adultery and steal and fornicate and kill and things like this. So those are all in line with the previous prophets. So what is it that he taught his people that it does not align with the previous prophets, where you could say, oh, he's not a prophet and these are, like, well, okay, I'll accept Moses, but I won't accept the prophet Muhammad?
so you can
Hold on,
have.
James,
Might be
just
a good way.
before you go, I don't want to interrupt your answer, but I wanted to share this with combating everyone. Brother Ibn, welcome on the stage. Akhi, I
But I do
looked
have
at
to get
your
ready to
I looked at your
go.
YouTube channel and I found this video. I thought it was funny, but I'd like some clarification from you on it. Okay, listen.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey guys, so I was asked what is the best argument for Islam. Well, here is the best argument for Islam. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and
Okay, that was kind of funny, but it got me
Do you know what the
curious. And
term? You know what the term Rickrolled is?
yeah.
So it's where you are. You're about to say something profound, and then you just play like a clip. And so the joke is that there are no good arguments for Islam. But here's the thing: if I was a Christian who thought there was good arguments for Islam, I would be Muslim.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. So okay, that's a fair thing to say. I what my question to you was, what do you think about being disrespectful to Islam? Because that's really what I want to discern from watching this video.
Oh, okay. Um, go check out my channel with other conversations that I've had with some Muslim guests. I interviewed Jake on my channel, the Muslim metaphysician. I had Yusuf Ponders. We recently had a falling out, but I treated him very respectfully. I've had brother Nizam, who joins the big guys on EF Dawa. I've had him on a couple of times. So I would say go back and watch those individual interactions. I would also say go back to my channel and watch if I ever go after low hanging fruit like
Never gonna give you up. go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.